everyone. Welcome. It's good to see so many people in the audience tonight. My name is Mary Embry. I'm a professor at Indiana University in Bloomington. I teach in the Eskenazi School of Art, Architecture, and Design. I have been a fair trade advocate for over 20 years and have been teaching for about 15 years. And I get to be your moderator tonight. I'd like to now welcome the panelists to the stage. So while they're arriving, I'm going to have them introduce themselves. They'll do it much better than I could. While they're coming up here, I want to thank Chicago Fair Trade for arranging this panel tonight, for bringing in our panelists into this beautiful space, into the Cultural Center. And thank you to Catherine Cordova for being a tireless supporter of fair trade beyond her title of executive director and always doing it with so much humor and fun. So I'm really excited to see this group of change makers all together in one space to talk tonight. I'd like to start by you guys actually introducing yourselves and telling us what you do and why you do it. So let's start.
Does that mean I have to start first?
Okay. Yeah.
So I could do it. My name is Abigail Glahn-Lathbury. I'm an artist and designer. I'm also an assistant professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where I teach fashion design and pattern making. I think the more critical reason, though, why I'm here, aside from the other things, is a project that I launched about 5 years ago with a collaborator in Los Angeles called the Rational Dress Society. And we make an experimental utopian jumpsuit to replace all clothing in perpetuity. It comes in a lot of sizes, and I probably will take the radical stance here.
Depending on how I feel, I might join you. My name is Elizabeth Klein. I am a New York-based author and journalist. I have 2 books out. The first was Overdressed: The Shockingly High Cost of Cheap Fashion, which came out in 2012. And then just this August, I followed it up with The Conscious Closet: The Revolutionary Guide to Looking Good While Doing Good.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jonit Bookheim, and I'm one of the owners of a local fair trade fashion brand based here in Chicago called Mata Traders. And we design women's apparel and jewelry produced by women's cooperatives and artisan groups in India and Nepal. So we're committed to practicing the principles of fair trade with our trading partners in India and Nepal. And then we're mainly a wholesaler, so we sell to shops and boutiques all around the US.
Hi, my name is Isabel Varela. I'm also based in New York City. I'm a eco speaker, educator, and artist. And my mission is to bring more awareness to the psychological effects that the fashion industry has on humanity and the environment. And with the documentary Fashion Addict, there are 2 main goals. The first one is to empower everyone that any adversities that we have in our life we're completely capable of overcoming. And the second is to show the correlation between the relationship we have with ourselves, the relationship we have with our clothing, also impacts the relationship we have with the environment.
Wow, this covers a lot of ground on the stage. It's pretty amazing. You all have such unique positions in the industry. I want to start with you, Elizabeth, because it is called A Conscious Closet, the title of this panel. So give us the overview. What is a conscious closet? Is it ethical fashion? Is it fair fashion? Is it slow fashion? And how does it encompass all of those things?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. And first of all, your film resonated so much with me because if you've read Overdressed, you already know this, but I was also a bit of a fashion addict myself, although I kind of came at it from a different perspective where I was kind of a bargain hunter. I saw shopping cheap as sport, really. And I think it was more so out of lack of respect for the clothing industry and wanting to distance myself from an industry that I found to be shallow. I just didn't have a lot of connection to it. So my solution was to just buy a lot of cheap stuff. And then, similar to yourself, turned around one day and was like, wow, I have a lot of clothes. This is a problem, and what really am I running from? And that kind of set me on a journey to write Overdressed and kind of look at the hidden environmental and social toll behind disposable clothing and behind our addiction, cultural addiction to fast fashion. But your question is about what is conscious fashion, and I just think that, it's a nice way to just kind of describe the concept of being more mindful about clothing. I think it's really easier than ever to not think about what you're wearing. Clothes are ubiquitous, they're affordable, it's very easy to just buy them, wear them, and discard them. So to me, conscious fashion kind of just encompasses this whole ethical, sustainable clothing movement, and it also starts with a very easy ask, which is not that you have to change everything about how you go about clothing. The first step is just being more mindful and deciding that clothing is a subject that matters, that it's worth exploration, that it's worth us sitting in this room together, taking it seriously and really exploring how we can change our relationship to clothing, but also how we can change the industry.
Yeah. I like how the book weaves mindfulness throughout the whole text of it. When it was first came out and it's this big, I was like, you can write that much about thinking about clothes? How did she do that? But you did. And so I'm curious give us, without giving us the whole book, give us a peek into what are conscious habits that you could give us kind of an insight into.
I mean, I really want to make sure everyone has a chance to join this conversation. So I don't want to dominate the conversation, but to me, I've been very fortunate to talk to audiences all around the world about the clothing industry and the impact that it has on the environment and the impact that it has on human rights. And what I discovered over time is something that's so obvious, which is that clothing is very personal and that every single person has a different relationship to it. And some people, they're always going to be a minimalist. They don't want to think a lot about what they are wearing. And then other people really love fashion. Some people are activists. Some people are not. So I think for me, I just tried to make the book as accommodating as possible. So that book is full of everything from how to find something really cool in a thrift store, to how to mend your clothes, to how to shop for quality, to how to talk back to brands that you like that you suspect are not doing anything to be ethical or sustainable. So it's not just a shopping guide, it's also an educational tool, a resource guide, an activist guide. I kind of just tried to take everything that people have asked me over the years and put it in this resource for people to empower them in their clothing choices. Yeah.
Jonit, I want to move to your work a little bit. I know when I've traveled the world, the most moving experiences I've had is meeting makers, clothing makers, that work long hours to produce what we wear. How do customers connect with makers?
Well, I think that's one of the challenges of our contemporary life is how do you know who's behind the products you're buying, whether it's clothing or anything that you're buying, what's the story behind it? And that's one of the special attributes of fair trade and ethical fashion is that there's more transparency and more understanding of how the product is made, how the dress is made, where it comes from, who's making it. And so for a company like ours, that's what we're trying to do, is make that more personal connection from the person who's making it to the end consumer. And there are especially in the fashion industry, traditionally, so many players on that supply chain. So there's a long supply chain it's complicated. But fair trade is trying to make it more simple. It's the producer to us, to the shop, to the customer. So we do our best on our website and to provide our retailers with information about who is making our clothes and the impact that has on their lives, the work that they're doing, and so that the customer does understand the impact, whether it be positive or unknown, for more traditional companies. But it does kind of give you that sense of like, okay, I do understand the background behind the purchase I'm making and how it has an impact on people halfway around the world from you.
Do you have examples of how you've seen customers connect with the Mata story?
Yeah. Well, we have some great videos on our YouTube channel where we're interviewing women who make the clothes, and so I think people really respond to that, just hearing their stories in their own words and with subtitles. And yeah, I think that is like a neat way for customers to connect more directly. And on our blog, we try to share stories of the impact that we have with the women and the work that they're doing in India and the impact they have on their own communities and their own families.
So you talking about impact is really important as well. Yeah. Isabel, so at the end of your movie, you state that you don't have to give up shopping entirely to still have this relationship with fashion. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, so the most important part is and what I bring up in the movie it's the intention behind why we shop. So as you guys see, my intention was definitely more negative in the beginning because I was hiding and fashion was my mask. But once I changed my perspective and started to feel better about myself, that relationship also changed. And something that I also offer with Positive Solutions is shopping in your closet first. See what you want to, see if anything you can mend or repair. And also, I'm definitely an advocate for secondhand stores and also even swap shops.
Great. So Abigail, I'd like to hear your response to that kind of issue. What is our consumer action on the consumer end, and what is our collective action?
So, like, what is a solution?
Sure, yeah.
So, I mean, my solution?
What's your solution?
Wear a jumpsuit every day. But also for real. So I guess a little bit of background. I had a line of clothing for 10 years. I produced a line of women's wear out of Chicago and sold it at New York Market Week and did the whole, wholesale shuffle. And it was producing feelings of like deep alienation in me, actually, as a designer and a producer, because I was producing things that I couldn't afford. And I was like, this is a trouble. But of course, I had internalized the trouble as my own. And it was not until I started working on this project where I was like, why am I so crabby? That I was like, oh, it's the industry. It's not me. There are all these other sort of external factors. And so the project of Jumpsuit has allowed me to sort of get off of that treadmill. And what's been interesting for me is the way that it's changed how I consume all things. So not just in the way that I consume clothing, like I buy underwear and socks, the occasional pair of shoes, but it's actually like it's all things, or I'll start to notice my own behavior. Like I was at a thrift store last night, actually, gathering clothing for a demo that I did with my students today, and it had been a minute since I've been in a thrift store, and oh my God, I was like so juiced, I was like running around and I was like, do I need this plate? And then I like carried around all these plates with me for a while, and then I was like, no, you're crazy, what? Put them down. But it was this wild, it's wild. And I bring that up only because there is there's a lot of psychology, or like a lot of, like, so you mentioned serotonin in the video, like it is real. And I think like one of the things that I'm more interested is in thinking about our habits and the larger structures of how we get there, than I am about necessarily like, this sock is better than this other sock, but instead like, why are the socks the way that they are? Like why is it that these are the options that we are having, or like what is it? What are the sort of late capitalist structures that have us, thinking that we have this endless fountain of expression in the form of mass-manufactured identical T-shirts? So I don't, that was a round answer, but
No, it was good. The jumpsuit thinking, uniform thinking is like one way to start to get a more structural change, I believe, in what we're talking about. I'd like all of you to respond to like, what's possible. Is it possible to have an industry that's really forward-thinking on climate change, that really is an example to the kinds of things that we need to have happen around the globe? How do we all feel about that?
I do not want to go first.
I will happily go first.
I was like,
Keep going. Yeah, it is possible. Like, something like my project is like pretty polemical, and it's polemical on purpose, right? If we all came here today and we're like, well, we could, maybe if you wanted, we could talk about it. But instead, if it's like, no, here's this like really radical position, it gets people riled, and then all of a sudden you're actually able to have a conversation or like shift the way that you're thinking about something. And so like one of the criticisms that we often get for the project, and there are many, is like, yes, but is the idea of wearing a jumpsuit every day, is it scalable? Like, is this possible? Do you actually just want to put everybody in uniform? No, the answer is no. You heard it here first. I'm not actually interested in that. But I am interested in the way that we could all start thinking differently, right? That like maybe my uniform isn't working so much for you, but it also sort of gets to the idea of like scalability, and is something scalable? And I happen to think that scalability is overwhelmingly a capitalist construct, actually, right? That like the idea that there would be a silver bullet that would fix everything, and anytime you start to make any kind of suggestion that is outside of like the paradigm that we exist in, everybody's like, yeah, but it's, it's not scalable. So it's like, okay, well, so then the answer is to do nothing? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like, we have really complex global supply chains and global systems. Like, they've become this way, particularly over the last, I don't know, since what, 1970, right? Thank you, Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, right? It got really complicated, but also that wasn't that long ago. And so I don't think it's a matter of sort of changing everything overnight, so much as it is like a multi-pronged solution that works for wherever you are, right? Like my solution living here in Chicago is probably different than Elizabeth's living in New York City. The cost of living is officially different, right? So it's my approach. I do think it's possible. I happen to love fashion. I teach it, but it just seems to me that there's not like one particular way that anybody's going to go about doing this.
there are also a lot of non-market solutions to sustainable fashion that are already happening. I think a clothing swap is a great example of that. I mean, this event is free, right? We're like creating community here talking about this subject. We're not in here shopping together. We're in here learning and I would say building a movement. So there are all sorts of things that can happen outside of consumerism that cultivate a more sustainable and ethical culture. And like, that's what we're doing in here tonight. And I think that because there's so much interest around sustainable and ethical clothing right now, I mean, certainly more interest than I've seen in the many years that I've been working on that. And that's really exciting. You know, a lot of people are kind of getting into it through an interest in climate change, which is cool. A lot of people are getting into it because I think that we're kind of at a peak interest in fashion in general. It's, you know, kind of just a mainstream thing to be really into style. And in terms of whether or not I think that we can save the industry from itself, I always just come at it that I feel like we have a moral obligation to try, regardless of whether we can sort this out or not. I kind of feel that way about climate change too. We have to do what we can do to make this industry better. It's a $2.4 trillion global industry. It employs millions of people. And everything that we can do to make it a more positive industry has huge impacts. And that's me having my positive cap on tonight.
So I agree. I do think that the society's changing. The idea of asking about, I've seen ethical fashion, fair trade fashion options grow so much in the last 10 years. So many more options to shop ethically. Mainstream brands bringing in more ethical lines or fair trade lines. So I think that is a lot consumer driven. And so the change is slow and incremental, but we are making a difference by asking brands to source ethical fabric and ethical labor and make sure that their supply chains are not being exploitative. And it happens incrementally, but in fits and spurts, I think too. I remember there was in the 80s a big drama about Nike sweatshops, and then all of a sudden Nike has to be really serious about monitoring that. And so, I think it is consumer driven, and that we do have to put pressure on brands that we like to ask them what's the process behind it? How are you making these garments? And that goes for other industries as well. And I think too, with organic used to not be a thing, and now it's a thing. So it is more the awareness and demand from consumers.
And also coming from a positive perspective as well, I definitely agree we can have a better view with what's going on with the fashion industry, which also ties with climate change. And I believe, again, with what we're doing today with the community, and also everyone joining and getting together with like-minded individuals and sharing education, bringing awareness, I think that's something that we can all do. And we can only keep trying to do our part individually. And then eventually, I believe that enough people doing the right thing, even if it's enough, it doesn't have to be perfect, I believe there could be significant change.
There is a structural piece, which is that, corporations, they're beholden to their shareholders, they're motivated purely by profit, and that is the purpose. Their purpose is to generate profits for shareholders. So a company like ours that's committed to fair trade, or there's B Corps now too, that they're saying that isn't our motive, that isn't our sole purpose, isn't profits. It's also to think about the environmental and impact on the whole supply chain. So it's putting people before profit. So that is something that isn't mainstream, that I don't know, Bernie Sanders, or it's a more deeper, it's a deeper change.
And the number of B Corps just grows every day. It's just ticking up and up. And I'm hearing you guys say that the change is incremental, it's evolutionary, but we see it. We see things happening. For people who may be in the audience that don't even know what the challenge is for, maybe this is the first time they're thinking about conscious fashion. What are the challenges? You can start to be an aware consumer, right? You can start to be mindful. But beyond that, where are the challenges, and what's the place of advocacy beyond those things that you spoke of? What's hard about the industry? For example, I read an article today by the Ethical Fashion Forum that said conditions have not changed on the ground for workers in the industry, despite the things that Nike have done, despite the things that companies have been held to task to by consumers. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say I was pretty disappointed when I sat down to write The Conscious Closet and felt like there had been a lot of progress in the conversation about sustainability. And we were talking about this the other night, that labor rights, I think you can say to a certain degree, things that were common 20 years ago, child labor, forced overtime, really unsafe working conditions, those were more prevalent. So, I mean, it's so crazy though, because the bar is so low. Our bar is no kids working in a factory. And for the most part, when I was researching The Conscious Closet, I found that for the vast majority of garment workers in the world, and there's more than 65 million people working in textile and the textile and garment trades, almost all of them are earning sub-poverty wages, which means they're not making enough to make ends meet, to pay their rent, feed their families, save up money, like all these things that we, for the most part, take for granted. And that hasn't changed since I was working on Overdressed. So I had this sort of dilemma when I was writing the book, because when it comes to sustainability, there's kind of a common sense solution, right? We extend the life of our clothes, we're more careful in how we purchase them. Brands can do a lot to source more sustainable materials, and then we have this like glaring issue of inequality in the fashion industry or clothing industry that we're not addressing. And it's not just in the clothing industry, it's in every part of our society. Where people at the lowest rung of the ladder can't get ahead. So this promise of being able to work your way up it's gone. And that's across all economic sectors. And I would love to hear what your experience just working directly with garment workers has been like on the ground. Like if you think things have gotten any better.
Well, as I know the groups we work with and the women that make our clothes, our type of fair trade, we're committed to working with people in marginalized communities. So people who lack market access, lack training, and just need steady training and a steady income. A lot, like one of the producers we work with is literally in a slum in Mumbai, and the little workshops where they're sewing our garments are within their home, like the neighborhood. It's this little slum neighborhood, and they all live within that neighborhood, the women that work there. So for them, like, it's not like, it's a great job, it's great income for them to send their kids to school and for their kids to even go to university and move out of the slum. But the woman herself, it's not like, oh, this is a job where it's gonna change her life and get her out of the slum. She's gonna change the life of her child, though. That's where you see the big change.
Can you also speak to the role of advocacy that I mentioned beyond the consumer? So like the jumpsuit. If you had a lot of people wearing the jumpsuit, that would certainly be collective action. Isabel's, video, your movie, speaks to things that are hidden that people need to speak up about. So what avenues are there for advocacy in fashion?
I would say there are so many great organizations and coalitions. Fair trade is a global movement. There's the World Fair Trade Organization, and there's people all over the world advocating for fair working conditions and fair trade. Like here, we're members of Chicago Fair Trade. You're a member of the New York Fair Trade Coalition. So I think there is that advocacy happening through organizing.
The community forming aspects, yeah.
I would even say Extinction Rebellion also, because they're also, it's more civil disobedience, and also bringing more awareness, but they've also been doing, I guess, some protesting for London Fashion Week, and they're also going to do some more things in New York as well. So I believe there's different avenues, definitely with the fair trade. You can go into protesting, and also even in the sustainable community as well in New York, there's also different things that we can all get together and speak about, and what can we do better, so.
There's also Fashion Revolution and Remake are two, activist citizen engagement groups that provide all sorts of tools for citizens to, talk back to brands, tell brands that we want the industry to change. And I think that both of those organizations have done a lot to organize people in a really accessible way. Those would be my two tips.
Yeah, and the Garment Workers Center in Los Angeles is another one that I would say, if you're interested in like actual garment workers, like people who make the clothes here in the U.S. There's Forever 21 employs quite a few U.S.-based garment workers, as does Ross Dress for Less. But I think the other thing that I would maybe like to mention is like I was amazed to read this. There was in Vogue, an article, Vogue of all places, an article about how ethical fashion is not a thing. Yeah. Well, or is it possible? Like, is it possible to have ethical fashion? And which I was like, from Vogue, what? But it was, it's interesting. And, the author was making a handful of really nice points, which is that, like, there are competing problems, right? That if we're looking to solve them through our purchases, like you end up running into troubles, right? So for example, if you had, I need a new pair of running shoes, for example. So do I get the pair of running shoes that has been made out of sea garbage, but that has been made, who knows where? Or do I make get the shoe that was made under some other sort of ethical condition? And so I think it's important to talk about the competing nature and sort of overlapping nature of a lot of these issues, and the way that there really needs to be reform coming and also going. I'm just going to keep talking about socks tonight, apparently. But like if you imagine you have the sock, is it made out of organic cotton? Is it made out of regular cotton? Is it made out of bamboo? Well, like there are problems with like all of those things. Is it made out of polyester? Also a problem, right? So like where does the material come from? Then like who actually makes the sock? And then if we're gonna stick with the polyester, then all of a sudden, also we're not donating our socks to thrift stores. Yes, generally maybe they were. I don't know. But so then there's a problem of it going to the landfill, and then there's the intermediate problem of like washing the sock over and over again. And there's increased conversation around like microplastics. And so I say all of those things, so we were talking about like really coming and going, which is just to say like, maybe pick a couple of things that really like extra trouble you, and really actually focus and advocate towards those. And I would also, I'm interested to hear you talk a little bit more about some of the policy things that you've been working on, but that I generally advocate to take the politics out of the shopping basket, which is maybe sometimes hard to do and feels like the thing that you can do, but there are things like Fashion Revolution, the Garment Workers Center, like there are ways to untangle it a bit.
I'm going to provide a counterpoint to that argument that I'm sure you've never heard this before, but so I mean, one of the issues is like in the clothing industry, supply chains are global. You look at your tag and for the most part, you're going to see Southeast Asian countries or Eastern European countries or South American countries. You're not going to see made in USA. And when we outsourced the clothing industry without trade deals that had any environmental or labor protections in it, to a certain degree, we gave up. I'm going to play both sides of this, and then I'll tell you what I'm doing with policy. But we gave up our ability to control certain things through the government. So we now live in this paradigm where companies have extraordinary power over our lives. In clothing brands in particular, it's a very concentrated industry. 100 brands control 90% of the profits. And then on the flip side, there are tens of thousands of garment and textile suppliers around the world. So we're in this scenario where brands, big brands that we are all familiar with, have all of this power. Our government has very limited or displays very limited control over these companies. And it puts a lot of pressure on us as consumers. I think we all understand that that is one of the places where, for better or for worse, we can change things. It's a really imperfect system. It means changing things very slowly, but it is one of the places of, I think, real power that we have. So that is one side of it. On the other hand, I think that the policy part of it, and I know it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but like the policy piece of it is missing in the United States. In the UK, the parliament has been debating for 2 years how to make their industry more sustainable. This is a conversation throughout Europe in the government. And in the US, you don't see that same conversation happening. Like, what kind of regulations, what kind of incentives does the industry need to push it in the right direction to pay better wages and to be more sustainable? And I am on a policy coalition in New York City that just started to try and address some of these issues. And I saw that the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, this is a tangent, but that they started a policy group too, but it's only working with European governments. So if you guys are interested in policy, we need more people working on that part of it, I think. Yeah.
So under this scenario where we have brands that are really powerful, you also have them putting out benchmarks on how we are going to reach sustainability. And so people see these in press releases, they see them in popular press. Zara's, we're going to have all sustainable materials by this type of date. H&M has a conscious collection, they're taking clothing back. What are we supposed to think about this? Is there a road to sustainable fast fashion, or do you suggest we reject them altogether? And I have to say that most of the clothing we get in front of is fast fashion, whether it's labeled a fast fashion retailer or not.
So to answer that, I believe that there needs to be a shift in looking at clothes as not being so disposable, and also it goes both ways. I do believe they're sustainable, but sustainable fast fashion could kind of be like a paradox there. But I still believe that if we continue to consume how we're consuming now, that's not going to change, and there needs to be a shift. And I believe the more awareness and education, and also policy, people going and speaking to the government, trying to change, and also even speaking to brands as well. I still believe there needs to be a complete change and just focus or shift in the mentality of how we see clothing.
I mean, I don't know. Just like I can't imagine a scenario. Even if H&M made, I don't know, all clothes out of unicorn whiskers or whatever. Like, if they're, it's a good idea. But they're producing such a gigantic volume of clothing that any sort of gesture towards sustainability is radically undermined, very simply by the sheer volume of clothes. So Zara produces 1.23 million garments every day. So, I mean, really, you could make them out of, I don't know, right? You could make them out of the world's most sustainable whatever, but it's just not possible, right? In the boardroom of H&M, they're not going to sit around and be like, you know what, guys, let's make less clothes. It's not going to happen. And so I think without really actually fundamentally addressing that, it's not possible.
Well, how do we fundamentally address it?
We don't subscribe to fast fashion. Buy better, buy less, right? It's actually not that. It's in some ways it's not that complicated. The other thing that I was going to say about this, the textile recycling. I'm working on a research project with Haverford College around post-consumer textile recycling, actually recycling Ivanka Trump brand clothing. and it's really complicated. I think we often wait around for technological miracles, right? Like science is going to save us all. But I would actually say that no, maybe consumers are going to save us all, right? Stop shopping, or be more, whatever. Mindful, thank you. Yeah, conscious. There you go. But really, like the textile recycling, it's one, it's just like not really there, and two, it's really complicated. Like how do you unspin a mixed fiber? Like what we're talking about is mining your sweaters for reusable polyester, which is like sort of possible, but not without material degradations. And I could talk to you about scanning electron microscopes afterwards if you want. But it is fully complicated, and everybody sort of thinks that it's like here and it's now, and it isn't.
I think that is such a good point, because I think that because of apps and Silicon Valley, we imagine that the way innovation happens is like it's just instant. And when you're trying to transform industrial processes, which is what the clothing industry is, it's textile mills, it's farming, that takes decades, and it takes a lot of money. When I have conversations with people about textile recycling technology, and just so you guys know, currently only 1% of our clothing is recycled back into new clothing. And yet it's considered the holy grail of sustainability and fashion, like everyone's waiting for recycling to come along and save us. But it's not clear when is this arriving? Is it going to be cost effective? Because that's the other thing right now, is the industry always goes to the most affordable material. That's the way, to your point, that is the way companies operate. There's always that profit motive. And as long as a virgin polyester is cheaper, it's going to, outrank that recycled material. But I think the bigger issue is that transforming a factory in an industrial process is not this easy. That is not low-hanging fruit in solving climate change. It's going to be the piece that takes the longest and costs the most. And those are the processes that the fashion industry is built around. Yeah.
When I started on this train, I would have to wave my hands around and say, everybody listen. And now on campus, I have students coming at me from media, from gender studies, from business, all across campus, interested in a particular angle of sustainable fashion, and they're able to connect it to food and more complex systems, like I've never had before. And so that's one thing that keeps me really hopeful that there's a tidal change coming before us. So what kinds of things get you excited? What kinds of events or moments have happened for you, or companies you've seen where you're like, oh, this is something? We're looking at Jonit.
I know. Yeah, I do see, it's funny that this would be my answer, but there's so much more competition for us in the market now with ethical fashion and fair trade fashion. 10 years ago, there wasn't that much cute fair trade fashion, like at shows. I go to a lot of trade shows where I'm selling to shops, and nowadays there's so many more competitors in stores that other brands that they can buy. So I think that does show that the customers are asking for it, and they do want it, and they're seeking it out, and that they're not just interested in the fast fashion, super cheap. They're like, how can this shirt be $5? Like, they're wondering how that can be something that was made in an ethical way, and they're right. Like, people are ready to invest a little more in something that's gonna last longer, that they're gonna keep and wear, and it's gonna be more special for them. So investing $80 in a dress rather than $20, but knowing that you'll have it longer.
There's also workers' cooperatives, which I have been noticing sprouting up. There's one in Chicago called Blue Tin Production, which is pretty amazing. And in case you're not familiar with workers' cooperative structures, they're different in that the members are owners, and everybody shares an equal say in the way that everything gets sort of divided. So that's sort of organizing from the production side of it, which I think is extremely exciting.
I was going to say there's actually Stella McCartney just joined LVMH, and she's actually helping to make the company more sustainable. And something that I'm working on, I did a presentation for Thomas Pink because they've actually been throwing away a lot of clothes. And I've been in the luxury side of the business as a tailor, and just seeing all the waste that goes into. There's some gleam of hope there that they're open to, one, figure out new ways of getting rid of the damaged shirt in a more positive way, and also actually just recycling in the store and getting rid of the plastics that's actually being used to package all the clothing. So there's some hope there. So it's just pushing and standing up to those companies.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so many exciting examples that it's almost difficult to sum up. And I think that that's really what's different than like 5 or 10 years ago, where, you know, you could name on one hand the brands that were ethical, and you could name, you know, on two hands, like the people that were working on this issue, and now it's this like huge global social movement. And the other thing that's changed is that, you know, after Overdressed, the conversation was always describing the problem, like what is wrong with the clothing industry. And now you come to these sort of like community events, and we're talking about solutions. There's a lot of stuff like bubbling under the surface that I feel like is about to break through. You know, like I feel like, for example, a lot of consumers don't realize that there are certifications and standards for clothing. A lot of people aren't aware that there's an organic cotton certification. There's a recycled content standard. There's responsible down and wool standards. There's about to be a responsible leather standard, because it's not as widespread as it needs to be, you know. But that progress is happening. We just need more brands participating in those certification schemes, so it's easier when people shop to kind of understand what they're buying. And also, another thing that has changed a lot is people's attitudes, and we were talking about this at the event on Tuesday. The attitudes around secondhand shopping are just so different than they were just a few years ago. There really was a stigma associated with shopping, buying used clothes, and that's really starting to change, and that's amazing because it's just like the easiest, most affordable way to be sustainable next to just wearing what's already in your closet. So those are just two examples I can think of cool things that are happening.
I want you to write a food pyramid for clothing.
There's the hierarchy of needs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to open it up to questions from the audience, of course, but while they're thinking of their questions, what projects are you guys working on now? What's happening with you?
So as I was sharing, right now I'm working for Thomas Pink, and the project that I'm working, I did a presentation because once they said they were open to hear some ideas, and also with Stella McCartney joining LVMH, so that was my cue to jump in, and so that's something I'm working on, and we'll be meeting with their environment committee, and I'm also down the Green Office Committee, and hopefully moving more into the sustainability side with that company. And other projects, working on my next film.
Yeah, I wondered.
So at MATA, we've been in this transition period, but we're really right now in this awesome phase where we have a new managing director, and she's just got great vision, and I'm really excited about the product assortment that we're embarking on. We're known for our dresses, and jewelry, but we're kind of mixing it up a little and bringing in other accessories coming down the line. We do have some organic cotton in our line with the jersey, but it's definitely a goal to bring in more organic and fair trade cotton into the line. So, I mean, there's always new initiatives. You had asked me prior to this panel, like, well, do you have to grow? Like, why, as a company, why do you have to grow? And for us, our motivation definitely is to bring more work to the artisans and grow our orders for them and just really be out there as an opportunity for shoppers to find ethical fashion that's cute and unique and like kind of a neat style, because I think ethical fashion isn't always known to have a lot of variety, and so it's funny how people buy Mata because of the look, but a lot of people come to us because they're looking for ethical fashion, and we help shape their style because they didn't know that they liked fun prints and quirky prints, and prints. We're known for our prints, so yeah, so that's what we're working on. And just always, of course, one of the principles of fair trade is promoting fair trade and just helping consumers understand what goes on behind the scenes. Yeah.
I'm just focusing on launching the Conscious Closet, but also using this opportunity to meet people. And I mean, the whole point of me writing that book was to expand the audience for this subject and make everyone feel included, because I feel like the more we are kind of cheerleaders for each other, the more really good ideas come to the surface about solutions and what needs to be done. Like, we were at Whitney Young High School this morning, and the student was like, you know, what we need is the movement needs a logo. We need like a symbol. And he starts sketching what's our movement logo going to be, and I was just like, this is amazing, you know. And that's what happens when you start talking to people and trying to create community and really build a movement around a subject, is you just get more ideas and more people coming to the table. Like you were saying, the thing about what can we do in the advocacy space? The reality is that there aren't enough organizations working on this issue. So if that's something that you guys are interested in doing, I just encourage you to get involved and to kind of do the thing that you're interested in doing, because there's a lot of space, there's a lot of gaps and work that needs to be done. So yeah, I'm just out there trying to get people excited and get people involved right now.
I have another art project. So if the jumpsuit tackled fast fashion, my next project is really dives pretty headlong into the luxury fashion business. So I'm launching a project called the Genuine Unauthorized Clothing Clone Institute, or Project Gucci for short, where I'm taking selfies in luxury brand clothing and then reprinting them onto fabric and giving away everything for free on the internet.
It's really cool.
I am a troll.
Thank you. So do we have any questions from the audience? Yeah. Make my way back.
Lights up. Those are some nice lights up there.
I was very excited to hear about the worker cooperatives, and I wanted to reflect a little bit about what fair trade means. I mean, there are marginalized communities and challenged communities right here, right, probably only a few blocks from here. And it seems like the concept of fair trade is something that's over there and we're helping them. But are there signs that there's going to be more of us helping ourselves, and that what this is like the equivalent of the urban agriculture movement for clothing?
Yeah, so fair trade was historically an international trading relationship, but recently both the Fair Trade Federation and the World Fair Trade Organization adopted domestic fair trade as part of the fair trade, their organizations. And so within the US, the Fair Trade Federation and Chicago Fair Trade, for example, have members like Bright Endeavors, and the Sweet Beginnings, and other like local or U.S.-based production that is working with people in marginalized communities. So yeah, there is such a thing now.
And I would say too, in New York, of course, we have, and all around the country, we have the Fight for 15 for retail workers and the Model Alliance, which is trying to change contract law for underage women who are working in the fashion industry. I also keep hearing, of course, the Garment Workers Center in Los Angeles has been organizing sweatshop workers there for a very long time. And the ethical brands that do manufacture in the US are starting to build coalitions to kind of rebrand Made in USA as a sweat-free, ethical brand. It should be synonymous with high quality, high-paying work, right? Again, to my earlier point, I think we're a little bit more ahead on the sustainability conversation, and the labor piece, we need to catch up. But there are cool examples. TS Designs in North Carolina is a t-shirt manufacturer where they use cotton. All of the cotton is grown in the United States, and the t-shirts are manufactured in the United States using living wage labor. I wish there were more examples, but I do feel like we're starting to piece that part of the puzzle together again.
Yeah, and I just want to caution about the fair trade, the way that I like the way that wording is used with fair trade. They like to talk about being in partnership. There's troublesome wording when you say, I'm out there to help someone, I'm out to go help them do whatever I want them to do kind of stuff. So fair trade, important partnerships is the way we like to think about it.
And it is a trading relationship. Like we're the buyer for our producers, we're their customer, basically.
I am had an idea last year and wanted to start a company. And it has to do with the environment and fashion in a sense. And so everything that I've been searching for to make these products has to, it's this unicorn that has to check this box and this box and this box. And it's been nearly impossible to find that made in the United States. And so we are really behind. And I actually have talked to Eric Henry, and you were the third, when I read your book, was the third time that I found him in TS Designs. But what needs to happen in the United States? Because what I've started to find in my 8 months of doing the research, that there are people who know each other, but they're not in an official coalition for sustainability. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I looked into hemp, and
you're going to have to bring these people together.
Well, I'm starting to
mission.
think that that's happening, and that's why I came tonight to hear you, and I'm going to go meet with Eric in a month.
It's a myth that we're going to bring it back, like we're starting over, like that's really what has to happen. And I do think all the people I know who try to produce domestically, they need help. They need grants. I don't know exactly how all this would work, but I was talking to someone who runs a brand in Athens, Georgia, and she was saying she needed to buy this machine that costs $7,000, but she's a small company. Domestic manufacturers need help to compete, on a government level. But I also think that it is about people like you who are very motivated, bringing these people together who are talking about it and figuring it out.
Yeah.
Because Eric is an example of a person who just connects, right?
Yeah.
He's that person that just makes it happen. Yeah.
Are you based in Chicago?
I'm in Chicago.
So there's also the League of Women Designers, which might be interesting for you.
Okay.
That's a great community of women or female identifying people. And they host, I think they just hosted one Thursday? I don't know.
Great.
It was really recently. But they host monthly meetups, and it's just folks who, there's anybody from clothing designers to glass blowers, you name it. So there are some sort of community type organizations.
And the one other comment I was just going to say is that I think that the thing that's missing about this is it's the early adopters who are forward thinkers on all of this, but the regular middle of the road people, we need to come up with a way to make it relevant to them. Because how does this impact, if you're an animal person and you love beluga whales are affected by this. And so how do you make those relevant connections so people care from where they're sitting?
Yeah, and at the same time, you have to compete on the product itself, like the style of it, the fit, all of those things. They have to buy it because they want it, and not because of the mission or the story behind it.
I was going to ask a little bit about, so, if you think about like the beauty industry, which is, related anyway, and green and organic and all this sort of thing, it's very confusing as a consumer because there's a lot of greenwashing. There's like the EWG, but like, are people paying them? Like, what's the deal? Do you know what I mean? So I'm curious in fashion, like if you're wanting to be more ethical, other than buying higher quality and less things, are there other resources for figuring out, like really, truly, who's following the rules and who's not? Or is there nothing that's dependable?
I mean, I do think there are certifications, and I talk about them. There's a lot of them, but I'll mention a few, and then there's a lot more in the Conscious Closet. But there are certifications that protect consumers against toxic chemicals. So those are Blue Sign, Cradle to Cradle, and Oekotex, which is OEKO-TEX. There are the organic cotton, organic certified clothing, and that covers natural materials. There's the responsible down standard, there's the responsible wool standard, but the easier thing to do, which is I'm sure what you're looking for, two of the tools that I always recommend is one, Good On You, which is an app and website that ranks major brands based on their social and environmental efforts. So that's really useful if you just want to shift your money away from companies that aren't doing anything towards those that are making commitments to be more sustainable and ethical. And it's very well researched and I think thorough. And then the Fashion Revolution Transparency Index, which comes out every year, it's a free report, and it also ranks brands on their social and environmental reporting. And again, that's a cool way to kind of be like, who are the companies that I like that aren't doing anything, and then which companies do I like that are kind of on the road to being better? And it makes it really easy to just be like, okay, I'm going to switch my purchases from these companies that are terrible towards the ones that are on the right track.
You could also shorten the gap in the producer chain. So if we have these really insane, complex supply chains, finding a local designer will shorten that right up. Yeah, Chicago's full of them. Yeah, I'm saving my money for an Anna Brown sweater right now. It's very beautiful.
So I wanted to thank you, Isabel, for your movie. I could relate to your fashion evolution journey very much. And I mean, I went through a similar phase where I was, really into clothing and purchasing. And then I remember seeing this image, I think, or walking into, I think, Topshop, once, and seeing the mounds of like for sale signs and just clothing. It just looked ugly to me. I'm like, why do I want to put this on my body? I mean, there were clothes strewn everywhere, and it was just like a very, experience where, I'll always remember that. So then, as a result, I launched my own clothing line a few years ago, a sustainable fashion line, where I work with artisans in villages around the world to source like hand-woven fabric, because I wanted to go the other direction and honor like heritage and not lose, the ancient craft of weaving, and to feel, I think part of the problem with fast fashion being so cheap, we forget the hands behind the clothing. And so even though I source this custom fabric from, villages around the world, I also wanted to work with, factories in the US And so I made everything here in Chicago. So sourced globally, made locally. Well, going back to the conversations we've been having about the cost of labor here, it ended up being a $900 jacket, which even though some people did buy, I mean, it was very hard. Like a lot of younger women loved it, but couldn't afford it. So recently, I went back to my native Bangladesh. Now, Bangladesh is number 2 after China in terms of garment production. So a lot of, like Zara, H&M clothing comes from there. And I had always had such a bad image of Bangladesh, especially after the 2013 like Rana Plaza collapse, where 1,300 garment workers died. And so, someone like offered me the opportunity to visit one of these factories, and this was 3 weeks ago. So, and you know what? I was really amazed. So, out of the 10 most sustainable factories in the world, 7 are in Bangladesh today. And this was a platinum LEED certified factory where they make clothing for Join Life, for H&M's Conscious line. And I sat down with the HR manager to also find out how the workers are treated, and beyond giving them work which is in the village, so they don't have to go all the way to the busy capital. They give them training on AIDS education, family planning, how to organize your workspace, which they take back to their village and they organize their house. And I was just really opened my eyes to the impact that these jobs make in that part of the world. And the Industrial Revolution happened in America and Europe over 100 years. And then to see in Bangladesh over 6 years that they're, but it's all based on demand here. I think it's being driven by what consumers are purchasing here, and it's not going to change overnight. But I think there are strides being made, and it is positive, and we need to continue being conscious about what we buy, and realizing that it affects millions of people across the other side of the world, and they want to also satisfy what we're looking for. So our tastes have to kind of change, and we have to keep looking. So I guess it wasn't really a question, but actually I do have a question about denim. So I was horrified to see denim and how bad that is for the environment, especially the whiskering, the distressing that goes into it. That's it takes up so much more energy. That's an American invention. How do people get more aware of denim is cool, it's you can wear it with many different things, but to be I think there's an image thing also of tying that to what actually goes into denim.
Well, there's the Cytex factory in Vietnam that's the most sustainable denim factory in the world, and they make all the jeans for Everlane, and I think they do the Madewell denim line. So, and there's so many sustainable denim lines now, like nudie jeans, mud jeans. It's definitely possible to make jeans sustainably. I think your example of the green factories in Bangladesh is such a powerful one, because that is driven by Western consumer demand, right? There is that little pocket of us that are we want this done right, and then you see that create a certain type of opportunity on the other side of the world. But we just need more of it. That's the one thing that's always frustrating to me about the Cytex factory. People are but there's Cytex, but we have this cool, green factory. And I'm yeah, but it's one factory of so many producers. And I think some interesting work has been done too around, one of the reasons why jeans are so bad for the environment is because it takes a lot of water to dye them. But people are working on technology where you don't have to use very much dye at all in the process. And that's an interesting development, and something I think that we need to see more of.
I'll be a little negative about the Bangladesh issue. So their labor experiment and selling clothing has been decades long, and there's been abuses over decades. in that industry, it's because they make all of their money, 90% of their export earnings, from clothing, and it hasn't shifted over time. The scary thing about, seeing something really good happen is that the apparel industry moves so quickly. And so if companies don't own those advances or amplify them or invest in them, they fade away. So yes, good things happening, but the size of the industry makes those things like drops in the bucket. That's all I'll add. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that. But that becomes the frustration with me of thinking of, we need to support mass fashion because good things are happening.
Who's the owner of that factory? Is it denim? What? Yeah. I wonder, because I know that there is a guy, he's one of the big sustainable manufacturers in Bangladesh that's trying to work to rebrand the industry so more people invest in money there and see it as a place for sustainable development. And I wonder if it's not, we should talk after, I wonder if it's the same person. Because I think that, we don't want everyone thinking this is just this sweatshop country and that's all it will ever be. You're right that it can be this huge opportunity for economic development, and I think it's good that you saw a good example of that.
So my question is revolving around the fact that a lot of these sustainable clothing lines are very expensive. And so this is something that's obviously good because you know that whoever is making these clothes and these supply chains are getting the proper payment that they deserve. But at the same time, I think that this does raise the question of privilege when it comes to sustainability, and specifically in the fashion industry. So I was just wondering if you could comment on how you sort of can reconcile the fact that a lot of these things are very expensive and do require a certain amount of privilege to participate in a movement like this.
I roundly object, or no, it's not true that ethical and sustainable fashion has to be expensive. I always use the example to pay a living wage to a worker in India would cost as little as 20 cents per garment. And usually when we say ethical and sustainable clothing is expensive, we're talking about independent companies that are very hardworking, that are trying to create a quality product, and grow a business. And meanwhile, the rest of the clothing industry, the ones that have the scale that can make clothing cheaply, aren't doing their part, right? The mass market brands are the ones that are kind of falling down on the job, I think. And then there are all these other strategies that we've talked about tonight that cost absolutely nothing, which is, shopping your own closet, wearing your clothes longer, mending your clothes, going to a clothing swap. So I think we have to get away from thinking about this subject as something that is only about shopping and buying an expensive organic dress, which is one solution. I do not small independent brands that are doing things right, we have to have them. They're so important, but that is not the only option here.
Yeah, I would say locate the power, right? And so it's better to punch up than to punch down. And in some ways, I think to criticize a small company is really tricky, actually, because of the power dynamic is pretty incommensurate. And the other thing that I would say about, I'm wary sometimes of that pitting against, because I think it also sort of can have a tendency to neutralize change. So there was, I'm going to try and make this as short as possible. I was researching, there's another part of the jumpsuit project where we're going to manufacture underwear. And it's called Reform from the Bottom Up because everything is a good joke. But also it's a serious project that works with workers' cooperatives. That's just another interest of mine. But one of the things that I was looking at, and I'm a cisgendered lady, and I was looking at like options for trans folks and like what is it that people need. And there was this article in The Guardian that was like, here are these amazing brands that are making this trans underwear, and they're super inclusive, you know, like they were incredible. And at the very end, it was like, but the problem is that all of these underwear options are extremely expensive, and unemployment within the trans community is really high. And so no one's gonna be able to buy these things. And I was so enraged, like depressed. I might have cried. I mean, I don't know. It was like, how is this possible that what we're talking about then, like that little tiny shift at the end is to pit a trans person against a garment worker. And I just think that's like a false competition. Like the real question is like, well, why is trans unemployment so high? Like that, which actually has exactly like nothing to do with garment workers. And so it's, I don't know, I'm leery of that kind of comparison. I'm slightly adjacent to the thing that you've just said, but I do think they sort of are in a similar stream.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, or build on what you're saying, that a lot of it is about wages in general and why can't people afford the basics. And instead of arguing that we need to perpetuate exploitative business practices just so people can afford disposable products, let's come at it from a different angle, right? Which is let's build healthy workplaces where everyone is paid what they deserve. And I also advocate completely, I never want to see, this is sort of what's happened in the food movement, where ethical and sustainable clothing is just this niche thing that never changes the rest of the industry, and all the people who care are just over here in the corner shopping and supporting the good brands, but we're not paying attention to the rest of the industry. Like the goal here is to transform the entire clothing industry, so when anyone in this room or in this country goes into a store, it's not a choice between ethical and unethical. It's just the way that the industry operates. Just personally, that's what I'm sure we would all agree to that. That is the goal.
We have time for one more question.
I actually would love to hear your thoughts on this as someone that runs a brand.
So our prices, we do try to, we're at the whim of the market, right? We have to produce something that is at a price point that customers are gonna think is a good value. So we definitely are sensitive to how we're pricing our products because we want it to be something that customers are gonna wanna buy. One of the tenets of fair trade, we pay all of our producers in advance. So before we start selling our product, they've been paid. So the vulnerability and the risk is not with them, it's with us. Can we sell our product? Are consumers gonna buy what we're producing? Do they like our designs? Some sell out right away, some styles, the market speaks, they're not so great, but that's where the sales section comes in, and consumers who are looking for a good bargain can shop our sales section and find dresses for $20, $30, $40 that maybe originally they were selling for $80, $90, $100.
So as the fashion sustainability movement progresses over the next 20 to 50 years, however long we have left, what are your theories on where that's going to leave the fashion industry and with sustainability and all the millions of garment workers, where is that going to leave them with employment? I'm just curious on your theories of that because we're trying to progress and move in the future. So yeah, that's a question.
I'll go really out there with this, but I feel like we need a new idea of development, right? Because right now we're in this place where kind of headed towards catastrophic climate change that is also connected to progress, right? In industrial development and the way our world works, that's created incredible wealth for a lot of people, well, for a small percentage of the world's population, and then the rest of the world wants to live like us, right? So it's such a huge paradox that goes beyond the challenge of the clothing industry to a wider question, I think, for humanity, which is, what is progress? What is sustainable development? What does sustainable progress really look like? And I'll be totally honest, like, I'm still investigating that. I think we all are trying to figure that out, because it has to be possible if we're gonna solve this. I do not think, if the fashion industry operates the way that it is, and we just tweak it, and we're like, oh, we're gonna use some recycled polyester and some organic cotton, but keep it growing, we're just gonna make everything so much worse. Like right now, the industry is at 8% global carbon emissions, and it's supposed to take up 25% of our carbon budget by 2050, just because it's growing so fast and it's so reliant on fossil fuels. From that standpoint, like, I know that it's gonna require a huge transformation, but I'm not sure what that plan is, to be honest.
I also agree. We're gonna have to cause a disruption, but also, instead of continuing to Band-Aid everything, it's just not the fashion industry. It's like all industries all across the board is actually getting to the root of the issue, and then it's getting to its money and greed and power, and that's why I support Extinction Rebellion, because also with protesting and actually standing out there and actually causing disruption, that's something else that will even catch more news and more impact. It's gonna be a big disruption that I think is gonna change everything.
There's a great book called Four Futures, which is about possible options for a post-scarcity environment, also automation, which we haven't really talked about. But it's great in case you're curious. It goes from like very utopian to very dark. It's great.
Like those, we could go either way.
Yeah,
and it's sort of up to us.
There are four
right?
possible futures, and one of them is very bleak.
But I mean, if we only have 20 to 50 years, let's just have a dance party for, I don't know, let's just have a good time, I guess.
Well, that's a good note to end the panel on, I think. Thank you so much to the panelists. I mean, and the moderator, let me, one sec, how does, like that, right? Yeah. Two of who traveled here from New York, one from Indiana, one from right up the street, and one from, but anyhow, thank you so much to all of you. Thank you so much also to DCASE. This is exciting for Chicago Fair Trade. This is the first time we've had an event at the Cultural Center, and we're very happy for the sponsorship and partnership we've been building with the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. They actually run an event that ties into all of this, Maxwell Street, which they've kind of rebranded. I mean, it's over 100 years old. It's the longest running market, in the country, and there you can get lots of purchase used items, and it's a lot of fun. It's on Sundays over that way. So highly recommend you visit that. We had a fair trade section there in August at their big deal, which was a lot of fun. So thank you. I'm Catherine Bissell-Cordova, Director of Chicago Fair Trade. I'm look like the rude person on my phone, but I was taking notes. Because I'm sure you were all watching me, not, but, no, but I'm chatty, and I was like, oh, but I want to respond to that. But to you said, and I hear this often, like, it seems like we're just preaching, like, how do we make people care, and something really struck me. In March, I was here in Chicago, the Fair Trade Campaigns, which is a national organization working on fair trade, had their conference here, and because Chicago is a hotbed of fair trade. And DeRay McKesson spoke. He's a leading voice in the Black Lives Matters movement. He wears the blue Patagonia vest. You might have heard of him from that way. You might know him from that. And he said, people always say that you're preaching to the choir. And he said, you know what, that's fine with me. Like, let's just grow the choir. There's a lot of people that want to be in the choir. It's really true, though. I mean, you think about it, a lot of people, they just don't know. But once they know, they care. This is an issue. We've been around since 2006. We started very much talking about farm products, fair trade farm products and coffee. And after Rana Plaza building collapse in 2013, we and as a watershed moment, as Elizabeth has said, and this attention was turned to it, we also, embraced that. And as people working in consumption and ethical and all that started working on that, we see young people, as she said today at Whitney Young High School, it was packed, and Jones High School up the street, they had their first sustainable fashion meeting last week. Over 60 students showed up. So I think the choir can be very big. And DeRay McKesson also said, and think about it when we're all singing alone, and think about when we come together and sing in a choir, and how powerful a choir is. So I do think, and Malcolm Gladwell too, with a tipping point, you get, organizers say you get 10 to 20 people, 20% of the people caring, and then you can have some system changes. So I like to believe this is possible, and I've seen the growth. If we'd had this event, we did a panel. Abigail was part of it. Thank you very much, and some other leading people in the field here in April during Fashion Revolution, which is every April around the anniversary of the Rana Plaza building collapse, and two other groups had them. All three were sold out this year. Last year they weren't, so it really is growing. My phone's ringing as I'm trying to read my notes. And one thing that Elizabeth said too, so she said, sustainability is further ahead. And it's definitely, I'd seen, some of these fashion schools would be offering classes in sustainability, and that really used to think like, oh, bamboo, and it's really changing. And we in Fair Trade are always trying to, interject and remind people of also the people part. I come from a human rights background. I care about the environmental piece, but it's the labor piece that brought me, and has brought many people into it. So we need to continually be pushing that, though, and having that be a part of the equation. So we at Chicago Fair Trade, could you raise your hand if this is your first time ever at something that Chicago Fair Trade has done, just to give a, woo, this is so great, see, and we always have more people. And so we're an organization, and we just changed our mission, so I have to read it. I tried to say it out loud at our last event, and I was like, but so we really just changed it. We do that. We've done the same. We started in 2006 as a project of Oxfam, the international anti-poverty organization. But our mission was like really long and explained everything we did, and so we spiced it up a bit. Well, we tightened it up a bit. So Chicago Fair Trade cultivates a community dedicated to an economy that values the labor and dignity of all people. Educate, activate, celebrate. So tonight was a good education piece. In terms of the activating and advocacy work, one thing that we did following the collapse of the Rana Plaza building in 2013 and 2014, we brought forward an anti-sweatshop ordinance, which passed. We spearheaded it. It was passed by City Hall, by the aldermen and City Council, and went into effect on January 1st of 2015. Cook County, a commissioner from Cook County saw that we had done this and wanted to do the same thing at a county level and passed that. Now it's hard, in Chicago City Hall, they're like, well, how are we gonna know what's going on in Bangladesh? It's slow. This is very intergovernmental working with the city of Chicago, but now if our tax dollars are used to buy any sort of garment or blankets, so when they do a request for proposals from vendors, before the vendors would just put down, our headquarters, these T-shirts or whatever come from wherever in North Carolina or Georgia. No, that's not where they were being made, but that's all they used to have to put down was the headquarters of the company. Now they need to put down the address of the factory. Now that we have you might know we have a new mayor. And as we have a new mayor, there's also, anyhow, Rahm Emanuel had a lot on his plate. We are going to be meeting, though we have a new advocacy committee, and we're going to be, reaching out and meeting with the Department of Procurement again and getting back into that and strengthening and making sure the ordinance is working. So once again, a huge thank you to everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Please stay involved, be involved. We've got a really lovely community in Chicago. We're very lucky to have it. And if you come to any of our events, I think you'll enjoy them. I'm a little biased, but I really think you will.